Survivor's Guide to True Crime includes discussions of sexually based violence and is not intended for children. Information provided should not be used as a substitute for professional medical or legal advice. Please exercise discretion and self-care.
My kids got haircuts yesterday.
Oh, they did, huh?
Yeah. My oldest, finally, he was like, I'm tired of flipping my hair. And every time he's looking at me, he's like looking at me under his hair. He's like, you know, tilting his head back to look at me. And it's really crazy and it's long. And he's like, I think I need a haircut. And I was like, I think you do.
I think, though, it's totally changing, too, because our oldest now is like, I think I want a buzz cut for the summer.
Yeah.
Thank you. God, I can't wait for this phase. The flip. Ugh.
That's also the thing, is it's starting to get warm here. So they want their hair cut. But I will say, so I cut their hair. I cut all of their hair. I started cutting their hair during COVID. Same. And now everyone's like, you cut our hair better. I'm like, I didn't do this to myself. So, and then the worst part is I accidentally gaslit him, because I was cutting the sides and he historically just freaks out all the time when I cut his hair because it's sensory. Yep. And he's like, you cut my ear with the clippers. And I was like, I can't cut your ear with these clippers. That's not possible. And then it started bleeding and I was like, sorry. I was like, my bad. I actually did cut it. I made a mistake. I'm sorry that I just gaslit you. I was like,
gosh.
Stop complaining. I didn't do anything.
But then here's the kicker. Do you apologize?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
See, that's...
Yeah. I was like, hey, buddy, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I cut your ear.
Unrelated, the kids have been learning about Van Gogh recently. And I just find it very interesting.
He still has both of his ears. Unrelated topic.
So we talked about consent in the last two ago, where we were talking about consent with hair and ear piercing. Fun life update. Our daughter got her ears pierced. So, oh my gosh, I made a video about this because, of course, this is a story that I've held on to for a couple of years. It was really important to all of us, but I loved how it illustrated consent. And so this time she has been begging to go back. And so I put together this video, and I'm not really showing her or any of the kids' faces anymore, but it shows her like from behind walking into the American Girl doll store. Well, it goes viral on TikTok. And I don't know how I missed this part in the interwebs, but did you know people are freaking rabid about piercing places?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
I did know, and I honestly, that's a bad friend move on me that I didn't warn you. Because as you were talking about it, I was like, I feel like I even had the thought, I was like, she might get raked over the coals for the piercing gun.
I knew I would because of the circumcision debate and the cultural kind of stuff. I figured that would happen.
No.
The piercers,
people are rabid about piercing guns.
And here's the thing, too. So American Girl does not use a piercing gun. It's a soft pressure one. So like I went on and looked and did research. I've had my ears pierced at a professional piercer before. I looked at it as the lobes, the very bottom. I'm there to make sure that they are centered and measure the right, whatever. Wasn't nervous about it.
Say measured?
They measure, yeah.
Measure? Measure?
Measured? Measure? What? Oh, you are a fine one to talk, little miss. And whenever I...
Measure.
Measure. Cool whip.
Colorado. Say Colorado?
Colorado. What? Anyway, they measured the distance, and it was
that right at the beginning sounds just like mayonnaise. Mayonnaise measured.
Mayonnaise. How do you say it?
Mayonnaise.
So not mayonnaise.
No. They measure.
Anyway, they were fine. It was great, and it was like the pressure. Okay, the gal that came and did the actual piercing was so wonderful. And of course, I'm looking at it through a consent lens. And she did such a great job with taking time. Like she did a little quiz on here's how many times you need to twist it, making sure that you wash your hands each time. Do you know why that is? And like, oh my gosh, I loved the experience. Well, here's the kicker. After I had put that video up, with my daughter's consent, mind you, because if I have anything that involves the kids, I let them see it first. And if they don't want it posted, then we don't post it. And I had said, hey, there's a lot of people that are saying, you should go to a piercer. Now, if it had been her cartilage, like any further up her ear,
yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I'm going to advocate hard for her to go there. It is her lobes. Anyway, I was like, there's a lot of people that are saying you need to go to a piercer. My 8-year-old daughter, without missing a beat. Yeah, well, my body, my choice. I was like,
I love her so much.
I was like, oh, okay.
That's the downside to having these consent talks is your kid is going to throw it back in your face at some point too, because I get that with my older son, especially. So he's 9. I get that with him about his hair when I'm like, hey, it's time to cut your hair. And he's like, my body, my choice. I'm like, mother,
you're right. No, I loved it. And she had a great experience. And this way, even though it did sting afterwards, she knew it was her choice. She wasn't traumatized by having to have done that. She's just like, okay, now I know I need to clean it and I wash my hands before I twist the earrings and all of this stuff. So she takes a much more active role in maintaining the care over her ears, and they've healed up perfectly and they're so stinking cute. But she was walking around showing everyone what she did. And she asked,
she's the cutest.
She wanted Mike to be the one that held her hand, and her brother. It was just like the most precious thing. I was chopped liver. I had to record for her.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I feel like if it's a girl, mom's chopped liver. If it's a boy, dad's chopped liver. Both of my boys, like my youngest today, he was like, mama.
Yes.
He was like, I'm mama's boy. Ah. And my husband's like, you're not daddy's boy? And he's like, no, mama's boy. And I was like, yes, still got it.
The mommies are the snugglers. But yeah, so I was in Chicago, though. It was absolutely wonderful. Mike and I got to do the closing plenary session for In Violence Against Women International's annual conference, and I loved it. It was really a great opportunity and sat well with the audience. I feel like there were a lot of presentations throughout the week that are all of the things that law enforcement or prosecutors or SANE nurses or victim advocates have done wrong. And what we were trying to impart was that inspiration, the thing that you take home with you to build better communities. Here's what happens when it works. And we got really great feedback. It was an incredible opportunity. And I'm full of happiness and gratitude now that we're back home.
I think it's so important to focus not just on what people are doing wrong, because we can do that. There's plenty of people out there on the world and the internet that are talking about all the things that people are doing wrong and the ways that social justice or the criminal justice system fails. And we experience plenty of that. And we are no stranger to those things. But it's also important to talk about the times that it goes right, because it gives the people that are in those lines of work a strategy to follow. It gives them a guide work to follow. And so if you are ever listening to this and you are thinking, wow, it must be really nice that they have all of these stories of success. Yeah, that's great. And it is motivation for the people who are working in those fields. But we have talked time and time and time again about the fact that we are no stranger to the faults in these systems. We know that we definitely both had positive experiences and that that's not always the norm. So just want to address that in regards to that, because I think it's important and it's on my heart.
Yes. I think you did it much better and nicer than I could have said, which is excellent. I also want to point out that the experiences that Kara and I are talking about are typically one experience. And I think that it's really important to remember that that's not our complete lives. We are whole humans with multiple experiences, dynamic personalities, and are no stranger to when the justice system does not work. I don't ever want someone to misunderstand us, because we do get that aspect, and it is not always going to go the right way for survivors. But we want you to understand that there are multiple ways to have that sense of justice, to find your community. And you know what? It's not going to be for you every single day, and that is okay. Find what you need. And if you're going to agree with us 100% of the time, I want you and encourage you to have critical thinking skills about the things that we say, about the things that our guests say. I don't know if there's a nicer way to necessarily put that, but
Yeah.
We want to encourage you to continuously think about the things that we're presenting you with. And we're just here to help be a guide, not to tell you what path to go down.
And I'm going to throw like a major curveball at you guys and tell you that our big capital T traumas that you heard in episode 1 and 2 are not our only traumas.
Thank you for that.
Just because we got justice in those scenarios does not mean that we have gotten justice in every other traumatic situation we have experienced. Those are just things that we've chosen not to share publicly about for personal reasons.
Yep. We also abide by the things that we tell you often when you're asking when or how you'll know if it's time to speak out. Kara and I are sitting here speaking about our scars, not our open wounds. And we would encourage you to do the same.
Yep. That's our soapbox on those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you're feeling real convicted by anything we said, just take a minute to sit with it and see why it convicts you. That's it.
Yep. Total changing gears here.
Ah.
Tell us about what you did while you were in Indiana.
Yeah. Okay. Funny story. My husband's like, Indianapolis? In Indiana? And I was like, yeah, Indianapolis. And he was like, oh. And I was like, they really stretched themselves for that. So I last year met Ashley Flowers of Audio Chuck at the Maloof Summit, and she was just as lovely and wonderful and cute little mini human as you think she is, and formed connections with several people in Audio Chuck via her, and have off and on consulted with them on ethics, things that have come up for them. They have consulted with me on what would be the right ethical approach. So they actually hired me to come in and do a training for their entire staff, which is over 40 people now, on ethics and true crime. And so it was the first time that I have presented as a training on this topic. Now, this is obviously something that I am very, very familiar with talking about. I talk about all the time. I will hop on my soapbox at the drop of a dime. And they hired me to come in and talk about it. And it was absolutely wonderful. They are experienced in ethics and they are trying to do their best and trying to grow and learn. And it was very apparent. One of the things that I stress to them, and I will always stress to all of you, and this goes hand in hand with what Kim just said about using your critical thinking hat, is that there's not always a black and white, a right and wrong answer to ethics. The important thing about ethics is that you have some guidelines, you're thinking about it, and you're talking about it. So I gave them a lot of scenarios to work through. I gave them guidelines, and we had great conversations. They had some amazing questions. And I just am really encouraged by what they're doing and also what we're doing, what you guys as listeners are doing, because in order to change the ethics of the true crime genre, it has to be a top-down and a bottom-up approach. And what I mean by that is you have to have something imposing morals, imposing a need to change from the top. And so that's going to be someone like AudioChuck. They are a juggernaut in the true crime industry. So if they are holding themselves to a very high standard ethically and they are still being successful, that's going to be kind of a top-down approach. And then when we have people who are consuming true crime that is done ethically, and they are calling for the true crime content creators that they consume to change the way they are producing this content, that's your bottom-up approach. So it's so important to me that we continue to have these conversations and you guys all become more informed. You're thinking about it more because it's going to hold other people accountable. And that's how you change things. You can't change things really. I mean, I feel like that's the only way. If you want to make a change, it has to be this sandwich approach. And so it was really exciting and really fun to do and very, very rewarding.
I love that too, because it's so in line with everything that we have heard and learned about that corporation over the years. The other cool thing too is that we are starting to get more involved in this podcasting industry beyond just like our absolute favorite human, Sarah Turney with Voices for Justice. You have heard Kara and I, most likely, both on her podcast before. We also, 2 weeks ago, we got to do...
Time is an illusion to me. I have no idea.
Social construct. We got to do a guest spot with the M Diaries, which we will be posting a little more about, and you'll get to hear Kara and I talk about this very topic with them. And it's been really cool because these are the places that these conversations need to happen. If you're here, you probably already have a heart for ethics in true crime, but what we're trying to do is educate the masses and make sure that it's not leading from a place of shame. We've all been there. We get it. It's a whole, you didn't know what you didn't know. and the more that we can teach and have these conversations in a positive manner, the more hearts that we're going to change, the more ad dollars we're going to change, which is a lovely little segue to talk about our Patreon.
Yeah, because let's face it, we haven't talked a ton about this, but we did not initially enter into this idea of doing a podcast under the premise that we would be doing everything alone. And we do. Kim does all of the editing, and she does the show notes, and she does the graphics for the shows. I do the website, and I do a lot of the more administrative stuff. I do a lot of the videos. It's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort. That was not our intention. However, that's the reality, and that's fine. We are very happy with that. But some of the things we are passionate about are giving back to the communities that we serve. And realistically, that takes money. We also would love, and for this entire time would have loved, to free up some of Kim's mental space by allowing her to not be the one doing all the editing, because she does a fantastic job. You guys all commend her. Like, go to the comments, go to her page and be like, Kim, you know, because she does. She does an amazing job. She's like, cries every week doing it. But realistically, the ideal would be, let's have someone to edit. And we can say thanks to those of you who have taken a leap of faith with us. You have joined our Patreon. You are the reason that we are still going. We do have our Cured sponsor. They took a leap of faith with us, but Cured and Patreon, that's how we're paying our podcast bills, so to speak, because there's a lot of things we got to pay for, you know, like audio processing and recording. Like, there's a lot of things. And so those of you who are on Patreon, you are supporting us. We thank you. And if you want to know how to support us, that's it. Patreon is our biggest source. And then obviously anyone who chooses to sponsor us, like, go spend money with them, because that just lets them know that you think our content is valuable. Because as we have recently learned, the content that we are putting out is not sexy.
Correct.
It doesn't sell.
Those are the real words.
Yeah. So yeah, that's literally what we were told. So I kind of equated it to, like, we are making content for the feminine gaze. We're not out here making content for the male gaze and for anyone. I had to explain it to Kim, because Kim's like, I think I know what that means, but could you explain? And I was like, okay, so it's like what men think women think is sexy versus what women actually think is sexy. So it's like men think that women like, give me an example.
Arnold Schwarzenegger in his heyday, bodybuilding,
right,
massive, won't dance, macho.
Right.
Guess what really is? Pedro Pascal.
Everyone thinks Pedro Pascal. Everybody has this weird, like, obsession love with Pedro Pascal. It's because he's
just so sweet.
I know, because he appeals to the feminine gaze. And so it's like, we appeal to the feminine gaze, and we are okay with that.
We are the pockets on your sweatpants. That's what this podcast is.
We are your favorite hoodie and your sweatpants that you can't get enough of, and those ugly ass ratty slippers you wear. That's us.
But we're gonna get the job done, and you know we're reliable. That's us. As Taylor Swift would say, we are the cardigan of your podcast lineup.
Yeah. And if you think we're sexy, then feel free to support us.
That's maybe not the right word. We don't really care what word you use. We would just love to have you in our captive audience.
Yeah.
That dollar amount, everything that you all are pledging, it goes back into producing this podcast and making content that hopefully is helping people, which is exactly what we want at the end of the day. We're not going to bend our morals or our principles, and we don't want to be too high horse here about this, but it's really important to us to keep continuously putting out content that matters and that sticks with why we started this in the first place. So if you are looking for that sexy advertiser draw crime show, this isn't going to be it. This is going to be where you go once you've matured a little bit and want to hear about the people that are at the center of these cases and how they went on to become who they are now.
Yeah, for sure. And if this is the type of content, like us just going back and forth and being our ridiculous selves, if you like this less serious side of us, well, the Patreon's also the space for that. So we will move on from that. We just want to remind you that is how you can support us. The other ways you support us are obviously sharing, liking, rating, reviewing, downloading, all the things of the podcast itself. That's always going to help us just get in front of more eyes and ultimately reach more people. And that's always our goal.
The other cool thing is today is the very first episode that we have outsourced to an editor. He did a wonderful job. We are very happy with having that same mental space, which allowed for Kara to travel and me to travel at the same time, put out more video content on social media and be more interactive with all of you. So it's definitely been a blessing to me to hear that come back and know that, oh my gosh, I don't have to do all of those little things because it takes hours upon hours for me. And it was just really, what's the word I'm looking for? A relief. It was a sense of relief to have someone else in our corner helping us. And it's those of you on Patreon that are helping make that. You are my Lexapro this week. Thank you.
Yeah. So
not to put too fine a point on it.
No pressure, but you're holding us together.
You're it. You are the two little drops of serotonin that are rubbing together in my brain.
Also, one last thing about Patreon before we move on from it. We are having our first live Q&A over there this week. So it will be Thursday evening. Yes. If you are listening to this in a timely fashion, you will be able to catch it. But our goal is to do those at least once a month. For the upper tier, the goal is twice a month. So because we're in the early stages, we're just kind of trying to get things rolling, and having an editor, having more mental space will allow us to have the ability to do more of those things. So there you go.
Exactly. So if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, it's going to be tomorrow, which is Thursday, April 20th. And we hope that you will join us over there. We're going to have some fun. Apparently people are getting ice cream to share while they watch.
An ice cream social.
Can we do that?
I think that's a thing. I think so.
Yeah. It's like Zoom happy hours, but less awful.
Like ice cream socials. I'm so down for it. My husband has 500 ice cream sandwiches in our freezer. So I might have an ice cream sandwich social.
It shocks me that your gut can handle ice cream, actually.
What are you trying to say? That I'm not?
You know exactly what I'm trying to say.
It's like, have you ever seen those memes of it's like a dog? It's like a wolf. And it's like, I am the result of 1,000 years of evolution. And it's like a little Shih Tzu. And it's like, if you change my food, I'll projectile vomit and have diarrhea. And it's like, we are the result of evolution.
Descendant of the mighty wolf. Will vomit on your couch cushions.
That's literally my husband and I, at least once a week, but realistically, probably like every day, we look at each other and we look at our dumb dog and we're like, he's the descendant of the mighty wolf. And we just like shake our heads and we're like, oh, God, how far we have fallen. No, okay. I can sort of eat dairy. It just makes me feel like,
Sorry for those of you with AirPods in right now.
It just makes me feel like I have something caught in my throat when I have dairy. But I do love a good Jenny's ice cream. Favorite ice cream flavor, Kim?
Oh, mint chocolate chip. But if it's Dippin' Dots, recently I have liked banana split, which I'd like to know at what point Dippin' Dots stops being the ice cream of the future, because it was the ice cream of the future when I was young. And if they're making American Girl dolls that are historic from my time as a preteen, I don't think Dippin' Dots are the ice cream of the future anymore.
Okay. My favorite flavor is brown butter almond brittle.
Oh.
It will change your life. Okay, so that is my number one. But if I can't find that, of all the random, most basic things I could say, it would be the Breyers Neapolitan.
Yeah, Neapolitan's good. I get that. You have a hard time making decisions, and that's 3 in 1.
Oh, but you get all 3 because Breyer, I feel so passionately about this, because Breyers makes a really, really good vanilla. They make a really, really good strawberry, and they make a pretty good chocolate. So Fair. It's like, it's not like the Neapolitan that comes in a tube that you can just like, unwrap and it stays in a block. Yep. Where it's like all goo. No, they're all 3 really good.
While we were in Illinois this weekend, we stayed with my aunt and uncle on their farm. That's where we would always go when I was growing up, and to see my kids playing with some of the same toys and doing the same stuff. It was just so lovely. They were having push pops, which my mom referred to as ice cream in a toilet paper roll.
Oh,
I will never not see that now. So the Schwann's man, Schwann, stop looking at me, Schwann, would bring us push pops, and they're the orange sherbet, and they look like a toilet paper roll. So you're welcome, because now that's all you're going to see too. Let's introduce our guest for today.
How do we go from that to this?
I don't know.
doing a little transition. If you have enjoyed our reality and our banter, you're going to love this episode with Tanya because it's very real, it's very authentic, and it's very good.
Yeah. I absolutely loved talking with her. But the Honorable Tanya Gould is a solutionist fighting against human trafficking, striving to impact legislative policy and raise public awareness. She's the Anti-Human Trafficking Director for the Virginia Commonwealth Attorney General's Office and serves on the Governor's Commission on Human Trafficking Prevention and Survivor Support.
This year, Tanya received the Presidential Award for extraordinary efforts to combat human trafficking in persons. She served 2 terms on the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. Tanya has given lectures and trainings at universities, human trafficking conferences, and faith communities, raising awareness both nationally and abroad.
She has served as a consultant to various anti-human trafficking organizations, as well as DOJ's Office for Victims of Crime, DHS's Blue Campaign, Global Strategic Operatives for the Eradication of Human Trafficking, Inc., and the Department of State's TIP Office. She also serves on boards and organizations such as Polaris, Beloved Haven, and the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum Taskforce on Human Trafficking.
Tanya Gould shares her story of being trafficked as part of her advocacy, as she does this week with us, and gives credit to survivors, family, and friends of her community who have helped her in achieving her goals.
Here's our conversation with Tanya.
All right, we are here today with my dear friend, Tanya Gould. I cannot wait for you to hear her story. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep, it's great being here.
We're so excited to have you.
And just to clarify, we were talking with Tanya before the interview and we said, do you prefer Tanya or Tanya? And she said, I don't have a preference. So if you hear us Tanya or Tanya, it's her fault.
I asked, and my eye is now twitching because I don't have an answer.
I'll answer to both. How's that?
Sounds perfect. All right. So we're going to start with our icebreaker. As always, tell us about the last TV show, book, or podcast that you've been binging.
So the latest show that I binge, and I do binge because I need to know the end of the story when I start it, is Medici, because I love anything about kingdoms and leadership. And one of the things that we sometimes forget, like we see the queen or king with their crown, we don't think about the details and nuances, and how they got there and how they have to keep their crown, so to speak, the backstabbing and all the drama of people who want that space of leadership and power. And then you have to balance having power in leadership and humility. And so I love seeing that in these characters.
That's so fun. I think historical fiction is just one of the most fun genres because it's these characters and these stories that you know or that you've heard of, and then it kind of gives them a personality and like the character development, and it just makes it all real. That's one of my favorite genres. So I'm definitely adding that to my list.
Did you guys watch Mary, Queen of Scots?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh. I watched it on the plane on the way back from Scotland a few years ago. And it was just, I geeked out. It was amazing.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time. The show about Mary, Queen of Scots is Reign, Reign. So it's the first season. And one of the episodes is called Left Behind. And her mother-in-law, she's just full of drama. And she says, history is written by survivors. I am surely that. And so I use that in a lot of my, keynoting and talks about believing survivors. Because if we want to move forward or evolve or grow, then we have to believe survivors, because survivors are the ones that write the history. There are other people who like to rewrite it and, give a different narrative or perspective. But, as a survivor, you make it through. And you tell your story, which is how things change.
On the topic of survivors and how they rewrite history, we would love for you to share, to your level of comfort, your survivor story, because we want you to be the one that tells it, not someone else to rewrite it.
Thank you. So for me, I was trafficked domestically in sex trafficking. And so when you think about the East Coast, I was trafficked from Jersey down into Virginia. I guess what I can really kind of hone in on is my experience with getting, being trafficked. Like a lot of people know, well, how does this happen? And I like to talk about the vulnerabilities, because for me, I was a single mom. I was kind of excommunicated from, family and friends, my community. Like I was exiting my senior year of high school, and I already had like my own car. I had to get my own apartment because I was a single mom. And I also had the early sexual abuse experience and CSAM experience with exploitive images, right, of me as a child. And then I also had spiritual abuse. I grew up with spiritual abuse, like cultism, of course, physical abuse by, family members, emotional, sexual, all types of abuses by adults. So my view of adults was just very unhealthy. And so I found myself in a situation where here I am graduating from high school and, having to think about how I'm going to take care of myself and still get a college education because that's what I wanted, and take care of my infant, my little one. I like to call it a perfect storm for a trafficker because even though I thought I was ahead of the game, I had all these bad things that happened to me, I felt like I was still on top, in my mind. I thought that I didn't have any vulnerabilities. I thought that I, had conquered what life had thrown at me, right? And then when I meet my trafficker and we're talking, the very first day we met, which was on a blind date, he listened to me and I'm telling him my story. And I always say this was like a profound moment for me then. When I told him about my sexual abuse experience, the very first night that we met, he looked at me and said something that no one else ever said to me. And that was, "I'm sorry that happened to you." For me, that was like validation, right? I was heard. I felt a sense of belonging that, when people say that they rescue someone, that's how I felt. I felt rescued, believed, vindicated, right? And so it was from that night for about 4 months that we dated. And he was amazing. He was awesome. He was 28. I was 18 with a little one. I didn't see that was an issue because if you think about my understanding of age and adult, right? What adults do, I didn't have that. So him being 28 and me being 18 wasn't a big deal because I had been in my mind living my own life anyway as an adult, with adult supervision, supposedly, right? So I thought that I was, doing a great job with taking care of myself and that I was wise and smart and all of this stuff. And so, which I was in some ways, but definitely not in all. I was still definitely a child, a little girl inside. And so anyway, we dated. He was just very spontaneous, with things. He got to know me, know what I liked. And I was also like very suicidal before him. And so during the time when we were dating, I wasn't suicidal. He would bring me flowers. He always kept my emotions on a high, which became addictive. Mm-hmm. Right. And so when it came time for him to bring me into the life, for him, it was easy. And it took 4 months for him to do all this dating. And then so I'll just say this part and then we can move on. He calls me after we're dating. I'm about to go to college and have everything set up, for my son and everything to go to daycare. I took care of some things. And he calls me. He's like, I want to talk to you about our life together. And I'm like, cool. Like, what girl doesn't want to hear that about the man she's dating, right? And he says, but before I do, I'm say a word to you. And I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say it. So he said the word madam. And I was like, I don't know, 1820s and stagecoaches. And then he goes, good try again, madam. And then I was honest. I'm like, I don't know, like an older woman takes care of younger women. They live with the older woman and they sell sex. They give her the money. She promises to protect them. And he was like, yep, you're right. He said, well, my mom is a madam, and I just remember first, my mind was like, this is absurd. Like, I feel like I'm reading a book, right? And then I remember looking back in my mind for those last 4 months and thinking, how did I miss that? Like, that would be like, I guess in a worst case scenario, my first red flag. I'm sure there were other red flags that I totally would not have gotten, right? Just being young, naive,
There's shades of red.
Yeah, there's shades of red. But that should have been my very first thing, right? And that was the inside of me checking it. Like, hey, hold up. how did you miss this important detail? And I'm thinking, but I have to play the game, right? Because this is a man who loves me. And so I'm like, wow. And he's like, well, my mom is giving me the business. Now, I've heard of pimping and hoeing, right? I've never heard it referred to as a business, not in my community, right? This is something organized. So when he said that, I'm thinking I'm so out of touch. I grew up, in the southern part of Jersey, and, maybe the world has gone on, but, why would the man who loved me put me in danger? So I am rationalizing while he's talking. And he says, I've been watching you and I'm looking for someone to come alongside of me and be my queen. And I'm listening and I'm giving a soft yes. And as we're going back and forth, he says, well, I have to have you go out there because you're coming in as the queen. The girls are going to have respect for you. You're going to have to understand what's going on so you can, show them the ropes, and, you kind of have to earn it as well. And when he said that, I said, I can't do that. And he said, no, you can't. I said, no. He said, why? I said, because I'm not a hoe. And he goes, you're not a hoe? I'm like, well, no. I mean, you, when you're in high school, I mean, I'm like a little classy with what I do, but I'm not like a ho-ho.
Right.
And he goes, oh, okay. So how many guys have you slept with? He does that whole thing. And, tell me about that STD and, who's taking care of your son, the state or your baby daddy, right? What are you getting from that? And then he says, at least my girls are getting paid for what they're doing. And so who's the real hoe? Because we know that a hoe is someone who's just going to do it and don't get anything in return. Right. And so when he said that, I immediately had this sense of, oh my God, I am the very person I've judged. Cause I had that sense of, compassion and empathy and, understanding of what is right and wrong. And I did judge, just like many people do when they see prostitution, they think of hoeing or escort, or it doesn't matter. It's not a big thing, but she's not someone I'm going to take home to my parents, right? Or she's not someone I'm going to take home because she's a hoe, right? So I had those same thoughts. And here he is calling me out on that thought. After he's doing this to me and, where he says those things, he says, you know what? I'm going to call you back. And when I call you back, I expect the answer. And he hung up. So, I mean, this is a man I have been intimate with. I mean, just really excluded my family. There was already a lot of exclusion because I was kicked out of my home, and the sexual abuse and the spiritual abuse. There was all this happening anyway, right? Had a baby out of wedlock, that's terrible. And so I had no one to turn to. At that point, for 2 weeks, I had no one to connect with and say, this is what's going on. And I just remember going to college. I went on ahead to community college, and I was depressed. Anyone would have known me. I'm very talkative, outspoken. I love to dress well. I love my bling and all of that. I wasn't any of that. I was the complete opposite. I was depressed, suicidal thoughts. Everything came back on me again. And then he called me, very matter of fact, and said, what's your answer? And I said, yes, I'll do it. And he totally switched on me. He said, that's my girl. I knew it. I knew you were the one. And for me, second flag, I did not know that he could maybe diagnosed as something else, like having a mental health issue, because who does that? Who flips on you like that? So, but yeah, for about 18 months, I was with him in that trafficking experience.
He knew exactly what he was doing. And by making you feel like it was your choice in your own mind, I'm sure, further entraps you, right?
Yeah, because they're master manipulators. And so when I said yes to him, I remember, here's me trying to be in control again, right? Because that's me my entire life, ever since I was a little girl, always trying to be on top of a situation that's, violent, harmful, but trying to think of a way to get on top. And I said, but I have some rules, I said, so first, don't put your hands on me. Right. So here's the truth coming out, because I know this story somewhere. I've heard that this is what happens. And when I said that, he says, what are you talking about? That's old school. We don't do that. And I go, oh. And I said, okay. Second thing. I don't want any of that money. That's what I said. I don't want any of that money because when we were talking about it, he was saying that he wanted to make this money so we can, of course, reach our dreams. I wanted to own property and apartments and housing and stuff like that. So he was like, this is what we'll use the money for. So that was my second thing. That money is to be used, like I had control over it. That money is to be used for what we said we would do. And he was like, oh, I'm good for that. No problem.
Narrator, there was a problem.
Did we get that in writing?
Since this is a business.
Oh, yeah.
A contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
The contract was drawn up and he did as he said.
Nope.
So when did you notice that flip? How quickly?
He played the game with me for a long time. How a lot of us with that type of trauma, our timeline is like just messed up, right? Because we aren't getting sleep. All of our days are mixed up. I end up dropping out of school. So it was quite a few months, I would say, into my first year, into the winter, spring, or something like that, where, so there's a saying that every pimp breaks their hoe. There comes a point where they learn you in order to break you. And, I was this person, like, can you imagine controlling me today? Oh my God, that would be terrible. Like, that's not a thing. So he had to find a way to break this sassiness, this tenacious Tanya, he had to find a way to do that. And he did. So he never hit me, but of course he would hit the women in front of me, other girls in front of me, but in a way to make me feel powerful. And I just remember like he would always like have me like in a front seat and always saying, well, we'll do what the queen tells us to do today, and they were all playing this game because there was a real madam, like there was a real older woman who takes care of the younger one, but she kept the back seat most of the time. And so this one particular day I would lose money, when you're not getting to sleep, your like mind is somewhere else outside of your body. And I kept losing money. And I remember he was like, he brought me over near a bus station and he was like, looked at me. He was like, you can get out and go home. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, I don't want you anymore. And I was like, I'm sorry, do anything to me. I said, why don't you just hit me? Because I'm thinking that's what you do to the other girls, right? Just hit me, get it over with, but don't put me out. And he said, no, you're not worth it. You're not worth me hitting you. And I remember looking at him like, what? He said, I tell you what, if you want to stay, then get out the car. It was raining outside and we're across the street from a bus station. So people are walking, and they see, and he says, go get in that mud puddle, which was in front of the car. He said, and I want you to beg me to keep you. And I did. I got out of the car. I went over into the mud puddle on my hands and knees, and I screamed for him to keep me. And then he sent the real bottom, to come and get me and put me in the back seat. And that's when everything changed. So he definitely found a way to break me, to break my pride. And, and it was just horrible from there. The romance ended.
Hey, Kara, did you know that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month? Yes, of course you did.
Obviously, I knew that. But did you know that it's also Adaptogen April?
Say what?
Do you know what an adaptogen is, Kim?
I understand all of those words separately.
So adaptogens are essentially some type of compound, botanical, that goes into your body and helps your body deal with stress. It's non-toxic, non-specific, and normalizing. So what it does is it helps regulate your stress hormones and helps you adapt to stress.
I have some of that, the stress.
Yeah. The good news is that Cured, almost all of their products have adaptogens. So it's Adaptogen April, and they are really doing a push on education around adaptogens. And it is genuinely something that makes them extra amazing. My favorite products with adaptogens are the Rise, the Zen, and the Aura, but they are also in the Serenity gummies. That's the ashwagandha that you see there. So if that sounds like something you would like to try, head on over to curednutrition.com. Use code KARA10 at checkout to get an extra discount and to support us, and let us know what you think.
My favorite platform to be on right now is Patreon because I freaking love our captive audience.
Oh my gosh, me too. I think that the conversations over there are so authentic, so genuine. And honestly, because you're choosing to be there, hopefully you really, really like us and you're not going to think that we need to be committed when we are completely unhinged.
I love those conversations. I also love that we've got merch that's available over there and a bunch of extra video episodes. To be able to watch it and have that feedback from the folks who are there that make up our little Patreon community is just so much fun.
Like the real unhinged pterodactyl laughing and me just saying all kinds of weird things that Kim sometimes cuts into episodes. If you like those little kind of things, then you're going to like our Patreon.
But you also get bonus content, early access, and news. And the input that we get from our Patreons really shapes what we are doing with this show. So if you're interested, please join us over on Patreon.
You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/SGTC for Survivor's Guide to True Crime.
And you can find that on our website or in the show notes.
Yeah, and this whole time, you have a child too, right? You have a child who you're worrying about, and I'm sure is used to further control and manipulate you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you speak to what that felt like as a mother? Because I think so many people who have survival stories are parents now or became parents as part of their victim story. And I think that it's often something that can be used to control us, but can also be used as something to change and empower us. So can you speak to what it meant to be a mother in this situation and then after?
So for me, because I was so detached and at the time of my trafficking experience, I was really only interested in what he and I had for those 4 months. And remember, I was a new mom and I didn't have a lot of support. Also remember that, I had a lot of negative childhood experiences from adults. So I didn't know how to parent at all. I just knew that I had this little one who needed basic care. So I wasn't nurturing or anything like that because I still needed those things. And so he provided that for me and sometimes for my son.
Mm-hmm.
So having this disconnect, with my child and, looking for a connection, I could only had the capacity to look for connection for myself. Like I was exactly kind of like the same parent that my parents were to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm looking for affirmation and love for myself. I don't have what it takes to do that for my own child. During the time, I was very disconnected from mothering, but didn't want to have him taken away from me. So I had to play this game of doing what he wanted so it wouldn't be noticed that I was involved in this situation with my son. So, cause we had night care. So when I would go, we would drop him off at the brothel. So I would drop him off and then we would leave. Or sometimes, cause I had a younger sister, sometimes she would babysit for me. But even that situation with her, I didn't feel comfortable because of what happened to me when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So either situation was dangerous in my mind, but I felt like leaving him at the brothel was safer because there were other kids there, right? He wasn't alone. Whenever I went to go pick him up, he was never crying like, he was being hurt or anything like that. So he was happy. So I was like, oh, he's fine. That was my attitude because I'm trying to get this love.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get that. So that changed for me when I had a situation. I was kidnapped by a buyer and, he almost took my life. And I had a realization that if he took my life that night, then my trafficker would have my son. And nobody knew where he was or what I was doing or where I was. And so, I wouldn't think that my trafficker would be kind enough to drop him home to my family.
Right.
Something happened to me. I feel like that's the first time that awareness came, and this was after the situation, when I was in the mud puddle, this happened after that. So I felt like, I had to do something, and that was my first opportunity out of the lifestyle. And then I went back to my trafficker like 2 other times after that. But that was the first time that I made my way out was when I was kidnapped by a buyer. And so when I got out that first time and tried to get on my feet, it was just super difficult to now like come to terms with where my life was and, still trying to get support, being a single mom, trying to get my life somehow in order with housing and transportation and school and daycare and, all the stuff that, you have to be responsible for, not just for yourself, but for another child.
Which is hard enough even when you don't have trauma and you're not going through that. Like literally just being a parent is difficult. I cannot imagine.
And having no support system.
None. No support system at all.
I mean, it was probably almost easier when you did have the support system of your pimp.
Absolutely.
And of the brothel, right? You had a support system there. Was it maybe the most healthy, optimal situation? No, but it felt more supportive, I'm sure, in a lot of ways. And that makes things so confusing.
I mean, when I tell you, I have memories of sitting in front of like social workers, because I'm trying to get food stamps and welfare and trying to get reset myself back into the system, having them look at me in a certain way, right? It reminded me of like how buyers look at you. It's just that disgusting look and feeling that's just kind of already there within you, and they're just affirming it. And that's how it felt. Social services, I'm begging you to take care of me because I can't do it myself like today, right? Because even getting a job, I still have to get there. I still have to get daycared. I can do none of this on my own. I'm telling you, I would be having like all these arguments. I remember saying to one social worker, saying to her, "You're acting as if this money belongs to you. And I have to jump through your favor to get it. I am entitled to this, and I should not have to fight this hard for it."
Yeah.
I got tired. I'm tired of playing this game.
Yeah, right.
And I actually it drove me like so many times. I would just be like, this would be so much easier if I could make a deal with my trafficker that the money I'm making, if I can make half of it or do something, just to help me kind of get ahead. Like, of course I would have those thoughts. I remember seeing all this money. When I went back to him, a couple times, I honestly was still only looking for the love, right? That would be the truth. It was like, I wanted that too. Not only am I dealing with all the trauma of what happened to me as a child that he helped heal me in my mind from, right? Now I'm dealing with, the financial piece of losing, like it was grief. I was on my way to doing what I thought was well. I had everything that I needed, traded it for what I had with him. And so it was just, it was super difficult, but having my son and then, a year after, I had my daughter and then just really trying to be a parent. I, finally did it. I was super suicidal during that time. And I remember thinking of ways to end my life without it looking like I ended my life, because I didn't want my kids to have the story that their mom committed suicide. So I would literally be in my mind, like, how can I do this so that it doesn't look like it's suicide? So, but yeah.
I think that's a very common, like, maternal instinct, and also very common for women who are in that place. Like, how can I do this where no one actually knows what happened? Because there's still like that sense of pride of wanting to not let anyone see where you got. And I think that's just, that's proof of how isolated your trafficker had made you.
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't want my kids to have a negative story of me. Like, they were already going to have a story that, I had kids by different fathers. Right. And, I was a single mom and, we had a hard life. Like, I knew that would already be their story. But what motivated me was I didn't want to be a statistic. Like, I knew that when I decided to carry and have my baby, carry term and have my baby when I was in high school, I knew that there were going to be some statistics that followed me. And that's what incentivized me to go to college. Like, make sure you go to college. Right. And so I felt like I was a complete failure at this point. And I didn't like the very least thing, the minimum thing was don't be a statistic. Right. But now I am totally, I've landed every statistic there was possible. And I've given my kids the same thing I didn't want.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that. I didn't want that for me, and I didn't want that for them. So that's one of the things that really burned at me, and into like getting on my feet and doing better for them. Like I'm happy that I had them. Abortion was definitely an option, for me. And I was on my way to the abortion clinic when I was pregnant with my son. I was in high school, and all my friends, we were going together to go have an abortion. And I just had this clear moment. We stopped at another friend's house, pick a friend up, and I'm looking out the window because I had to go to the bathroom. And I leave out the bathroom, look out the window, and I see the trees moving, and they're alive. And I was like I'm looking at these trees that are living free to live. And I felt this like thing in my heart. It was just like, who are you to say or to determine what can and can't live? Like, who do you think you are? Right. And I had to come out and face all my friends and say, I'm not doing this. I can't. Yeah. I'm just so thankful for that decision because I needed my kids to live. I did.
I think one of the things that we hear about trafficking is that it's one of the worst crimes because it's all the crimes rolled into one. You have sex assault, you have domestic violence, you have financial abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, everything all together. And as I've heard you say, it's over and over and over and over. So what would you say once you were out of the life? What is that thing you wish you could reach back in time and tell those people who are still there? What have you learned that you would want to impart?
I guess I would say to believe yourself. When you're in dangerous situations, you pray or meditate or you're pleading with something higher than yourself to be safe or to, I gotta make this money, right? I gotta show up I gotta have this many calls. I have to do this. And you're saying it with such passion because your life depends on it. When you're in that situation and that's your lifestyle, you think about death often. It's an often thought. And for me, it became a comfortable thought because I had it when I was a child with being physically abused, knocked unconscious, all kinds of stuff as a little girl, right? And you're constantly thinking about death. I find myself in this situation, constantly thinking of death. So it's like, what got me through is the same. It's like I carried it over to this side, right? It's that thought that I made it out of that. I prayed, I asked, I pushed, and I made it, right? And here I am, and watching, my faith and my belief then and bringing it over here, that remains the same. I believe, period, because I have that experience. And so, that's my thought to, I also have mentored kids at our local children's hospital who's been identified as being trafficked. And what I say is, whatever you see yourself doing, just believe it. Believe it with everything you got. Cause I know you got stuff. I know you have what it takes to believe because you've done it. Mm-hmm. This isn't something new you have to pick up. You've had to do this. Now let's just shift that. Let's shift it into believing, in a different space.
Yeah. It's this idea that you've already survived 100% of your bad days, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, you already know that you've survived hard things. So it's kind of like you can survive hard things because you've already done it.
Yeah.
Right. So kind of shifting that from, oh, why have all these hard things happen to me? But look at all the hard things I have survived. And so I know I can get through other difficult things.
Right. Because you do I know for me and a lot of kids that I talk to, a lot of adults that I talk to, there's this sense of entitlement in this way. I have been through a ton of crap. Nothing else should ever happen to me again. And when it does, you're surprised. You're like, I don't understand because I've been through a lot of stuff. Why is this happening?
Wouldn't it be nice if that's the way life was? It's like, no, I've already done hard things. I don't get other
hard thing to out. Thanks.
Yeah. I don't want to be one of the toughest warriors this year. I don't.
Right.
This meme the other day. It's like calling God and making sure I'm not on his toughest warrior list for the next year.
Please stop sending me other people's work.
I know I'm strong, but it's like Kim and I say this to each other all the time. It's like, I can do hard things, but I don't want to.
I don't want to. I've done it. I've done it. I've proved that I can do hard things. I don't understand what's going on here, right? It should be smooth sailing.
Yeah. Can I get some easy things now?
Lifetime membership at this point. I don't need to annually renew.
Right. I have a t-shirt. I have a mug, pins. I have all kinds of stuff.
We've got jackets. In the club, we've got jackets. Yeah, we're getting jackets.
Yes. Hoodies, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, I love it. So tell us about, like, how do you begin to heal, right? Because we see this amazing woman that does all of this outreach, who mentors, who does all of these amazing things, and, you know, is working in legislation and just really helping people on a very real level. How did you get there? That's the part that's interesting to us, and I think other people want to hear. How did you get from victim to survivor and healing?
There's a Martin Luther King quote I'm trying to remember, but it's a quote that where he talks about, I'm going to find it and send it to you because it's so powerful. Like, basically, if you want to be a light in the world, you have to have gone through something yourself. Like, you have to have not just gone through something, but walk through the process. And I just ran across this quote, and I promise I will look it up and give it to you because I know I don't have the words right. I just know that he's right because I say it all the time. Like, healing is hard, period. It is hard. And so unless you're committed to walk through the healing process, knowing that you've already gone through difficult things, like we just said, you know, I've already done difficult stuff. Now I have to deal with myself. You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
You mean some of this stuff was self-inflicted? What?
Yeah.
What? Like, I want to blame everyone else. I don't want to take any responsibility for this, right? And so that's hard. You know, when you have so many predators and abusers and all these controllers and manipulators in your life, and now life is saying, hey, but I also need you to take some responsibility for something. And what is that? Right? But there's power in that. There's ownership and there's empowerment. There's self-control. There's like discipline. There's all this beautiful stuff that you find when you begin to really dig deep and look at all the stuff that you hold. But there was this one particular time that, you know, earlier I was talking about being like suicidal. I mean, I was really trying to make a plan to end my life because I was like, okay, I can't stay in this place. Don't know how to move forward. I don't even know what that looks like. And I sure as hell I'm not going backwards. So God, we have to do something. So I'm suspecting you're going to help me come up with a plan to end my life. That's basically where I was. And so I was living in this apartment that had 2 levels, and you can go up on the roof real easily. So I had 2 kids at the time, and they were taking a nap. I go up on the roof with a chair. I'm dragging a chair up on the roof because I'm going to sit and have this conversation with God. And so I'm talking, you know, we're having this heart to heart, and, you know, of course, I'm wishing I could just jump off and just end it all. But I know that's not an option, which kind of going back and forth, you know, and I hear the kids kind of, you know, making some noise. So I go downstairs, get the kids, and I figure, you know, let me just go to the library. It was my first job anyway when I was 15 years old. Someone got me a job at the library. It was my place of escape. So I go get the kids, put them in a stroller, walk to the library, and I'm walking down this aisle, and I look to the left and I see this really thin book, and it's Gillibrand, and it's called The Prophet. And I remember looking at it and thinking, the prophet? Okay, what do you have to tell me that I don't already know about my life? You know? So I pull the book off and I open it up. And if you know anything about this book, he's a poet and he talks about the extremes, right? You know, what is love? What is grief? You know, and he kind of brings it all together. Well, I open up the book, and when I open the book, it says, tell me about sorrow. And I look at it and I'm like, I can tell you about sorrow. Like I should be the prophet. You know what I'm saying? I can tell you all about sorrow. I know everything there is to know about sorrow. I was just on the roof contemplating talking to God about how we're going to end my life. And as I'm reading it in a summary, basically he's saying the same cup that was carved out in you, in your internal, that holds sadness or sorrow is the same cup that can be filled with joy. And I just remember like, wow, like that's crazy, because what I feel like you telling me is that all this sorrow and sadness I had, which is a lot, probably more than your average bear, right? That this same cup can hold joy. You gotta be kidding me, because this is crazy. And I remember at that moment, I'm like, all right, bet, game on, challenge accepted, because I have nothing else. Mm-hmm. I have nothing else. And hindsight now, looking back, I remember having thoughts like, looking for the joy. That's what I began to do. My perspective changed, looking for the silver lining, looking for the good, like noticing the squirrels and, hearing the conversations of the birds and, like all this stuff became new to me. And I just began looking for, the positivity, and which was always there, but I didn't see it because life could just affirm that you suck and you're terrible and it just affirmed that over and over for me, because that's all I saw. That's all I was given. That's all I saw. And then my perspective changed. And it was from that point where things began to change for me. And, now everything I can't get enough of life. Like, I'm just like, and the other thing, when you heal, you keep some things and you let go some things, right? And one of the things that is about me that's just true to my core, I was a person who was being controlled. But I don't like that. I love my independence. And I was always like that. And I realized that people saw that about me when I was young and they wanted to put a cap on it. I was very talkative, and people, why are you asking that question? You're a child. You need to, always, was always reprimanded for, saying what I thought. And now that I'm free and have self-control and can say what I want and need and feel, I'm not going to be controlled, period. I'm tactful and respectful. I respect your thought and I love you for who you are or who you are not. It doesn't matter to me, right? Because love is love, but you're not going to do it. I'm who I am too. And I respect me first. And that's just how I live my life. I respect me and I expect the same in return.
I loved what you said about...
I'm writing it down.
I know. And I'm sure people that are listening feel the same way. And I love what you said about changing your perspective, because it's like your situation didn't change. Your vision changed, right? You just changed your perspective. And I think, one of the first tools that helped me so much in my healing was gratitude journaling. And it's similar mentality. It's like when you're pregnant, all you see are pregnant people. Or if you're trying to get pregnant and you can't get pregnant, all you see are pregnant people. So it's like whatever you're looking for, that's what you see. And so it changes your vision to focus on the joy. And I think that sometimes we can forget that a lot of the steps to healing they seem so insignificant. They seem so simple. And really, they can be sometimes. They can be very simple, but they can be so impactful. So I love that you just kind of gave people a tool that really can be so simple, but can be so, so impactful.
Yeah.
And it is that choice. You are constantly and consistently making that choice, which is something that can resonate with every single victim, is that your choice was taken away from you. So to have that power to say, I am choosing to look on the bright side today. I understand that there's a whole world full of crap, but guess what? I'm going to choose to find the silver lining. I'm going to choose to show up and mentor young kids. I'm going to choose to impact policy, or I'm going to choose to brush my teeth this morning. It can go huge to really small, and every single one of them is equally important.
Right. And people aren't going to always respect your willingness to be yourself. I choose to be myself as much as possible. And, that's not okay to a lot of people because people want to control you to do their thing. Mm-hmm. And especially in the society we live today, I remember when I was a little girl and was confused about the role of adults in my life. I remember thinking, I can't wait to be an adult because I'll be free. Little did I know the same stuff that happens as a child and as a, teenager in these systems and ways of thinking and belief and mindsets and culture, right? All these things were put on me by adults who had the freedom to be themselves, but chose not to be themselves, right? So I didn't realize that as a child. So, I move into adulthood and there are still, what I feel like trafficking situations, where you have the manipulation of, certain things and ideas, that keeps you in control. It's still something that you have to fight as an adult to be yourself. But like I said, history was written by survivors, and I am surely that. So what I'm not going to do is learn who I am and come into a space where, people aren't happy with me being myself, right? Because that's not a me problem. That's a you problem.
Amen. That's right. Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about what are you doing today? Because you have so many amazing things going on. Tell us about Tanya today, everything that you have going on, and Tanya today too, and everything she has going on.
Tanya and Tanya, both of them.
The twins. We're doing well. Okay, this is what I've been saying. It's like, I never said that I wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, I would like to go into outer space, but I want to be an astronaut, right? But I never said I wanted to be a doctor. I never said anything specific, but I did always say, I want influence, right? I want to change the world with influence. I did say that. So for me, it can show up in any way. An author, a performing artist, a politician. It could be any way. So I always go back to the essence. I lead with the essence of what I want. And what I want is to be my transparent self as much as possible so that people would have the opportunity to say, I can be myself too. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be afraid, right? There are tools and resources to help me be my best self and show up as her or him, right? Without any trickery, right? Without having to do any unnecessary trade-offs, right? So when we're talking about true freedom, living in a space where we have freedom and liberty, everyone should just have that. That really should be a basic right. And unfortunately, you have to fight for that. I have a problem with that, right? Yeah. Not just as a child, then coming through a trafficking experience and all that abuse, and then to come out into a world that sings and talks about freedom and there isn't any, not okay. Yeah. So that's where that comes from. It's not just. And if we're going to live a life on this planet and in the pursuit of happiness, not saying that our life is only good when we're happy all the time, but it's the journey of being myself because, there are many stories of people who have disabilities or handicaps or something tragic happens to them and they're happy because they found a way to live and be transparent and be themselves. That is what it's about. So I don't want the same goals. We don't want the same goals as far as a big house or a little house or this or that. No, we don't want all outcomes to be the same because I don't want what you want. We're two different people, but I want the ability to go after it because I want to. And so that's what happens when I see opportunities in front of me to say those things and to possibly put policy in place that allows that, it builds a pathway or a bridge to freedom. I'm going to go after it because we have to fight for that. So that's what happened, whether it's talking to one person individually, a community group, or a social media platform, that's what I'm going to do. And that's how I'm going to show up. So that's how these things opened up for me. is because I just find ways to to say a message and to make sure that everyone feels included. Like, I feel like, so here's like a quick thing. Have you ladies done karaoke?
My favorite song to do is Tequila.
I mean, people don't want to hear me do karaoke.
Right. Well, karaoke is for us. It's for the non-singers, okay? If you can sing, you should not be doing...
Right. You can't get up there and belt something out and
It's not who it's
be like,
for.
oh, she's
Different levels of non-singers, right? There's like, oh, it's cute, she can't sing. And there's like, oh my God, make it stop now.
Right.
It's like if you do tequila, you only have to say tequila 3 times.
Exactly. So I went to this karaoke bar and I'm doing Whitney Houston. I can't do Whitney Houston, but in my mind and in my body and my performance, I am channeling Whitney. Okay. And after I get done, the owner comes up to me. He was like, I'm so happy you did that, because after when you were singing and you did that, everyone signed up to do karaoke. And I said, yeah. Wasn't the compliment I wanted.
Everyone's like, well, I can't do worse. This is exactly our vibe, by the way. This is like,
this is the
conversation.
This is the real us.
So that's what you do. You know, that's what I feel like. I feel like if I can win or not win or earn, or, you know, if I can get a presidential award for extraordinary efforts in combating human trafficking, what makes me different than anyone else?
I love it.
Because I'm telling you where I came from.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I can do anything, if I could be director of anti-human trafficking for the Office of the Attorney General, if I can do that, right, what makes you any different?
Yeah. Yep.
So show up, like show up for it. You can do anything that you believe or you think, you know, what is the essence of what you want to do or be? Like, what do you see yourself doing? You know, like push into that and then allow things to open for you and take those risks. Because we took risk when we were doing things for people who controlled us.
Yep.
That's the accountability piece. I took risk because I wanted love. That's how passionate I was about it. I took risk, and that's my accountability. That's what I did. Yes, I was manipulated. Yes, it was wrong. But that situation showed me some things about myself that I can still use today. I did not live that.
Yeah, we should never be willing to take risks for people before ourselves.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that.
Amazing. Well, hey, quick last 2 questions. First of all, tell us and everyone listening where we can find you, websites, social media, and we'll link everything, of course, but what's the best way to keep in touch with you and follow what you're doing?
I try to do better, but I'm so busy working. I don't have time to say, hey guys, look what I'm doing today. Trying to get better at that.
That's what this is for.
I just don't. Just like, oh my God, I have so much to do. But I'm on Facebook. So it's Tanya for Virginia on Instagram and Facebook or Twitter, like some of those things, LinkedIn. Who knows what my handle is? Just look up Tanya or Tanya Gould and my stuff comes up.
Whichever one you want.
Well, and then the last thing too, because this obviously is a podcast about true crime, do you yourself consume true crime content of any kind?
No.
Funny. Every single one.
Single one.
So, you know, we named this Survivor's Guide to True Crime because there are people who are survivors, and we are finding pretty unanimously as we ask them, do you consume true crime? They're like, no. So this is a podcast.
Why would I?
Right. I lived it, right? That's kind of art. We're like, no, we lived it. We've, again, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, got the jacket, right? Like, I don't need to put it in my ear holes every day too.
Right.
So it's just an interesting conversation to have. And we consider ourselves a podcast about survivors and for survivors. And so we thank you for being both, being about and for survivors. We are eternally grateful.
And Tanya.
Yeah. And Tanya, you tell Tanya that we're thankful for her too.
She hears you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a really fun conversation and so enlightening, and we are just in awe of you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Survivor's Guide to True Crime is hosted and executive produced by Kimberly Corbin Rourke and Kara Robinson Chamberlain.
If you love what we do here, please don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show in your podcast player. It's an easy and free way to help us and help more people find the show.
To learn more about the guests featured or to find resources and information discussed on the show, visit survivorsguidetotruecrime.com.
Thanks for listening.
Well, see you later.